r/AskReddit. What is your childhood memory that you thought was normal but realized it was traumatic later in your life? Every time my dad would pick me up from school, he'd leave me in the car for 3+ hours whilst he went into the local pub and got drunk. Nothing to do. Just sitting there in the car. He'd come back after the few hours had passed and throw me a bag of chips as he started the car. I always thought I was the luckiest boy in the world to be getting those chips. My dad took me with him on a run to buy drugs. He made me lay under a blanket in the back seat of the truck. It didn't hit me until like 20 years later what had happened. Same thing happened to me. Nothing like falling asleep on the ride home from school with your dad, only to wake up in some unknown ghetto's parking lot in the dark with no sign of your dad. Luckily he's gone straight, but the one thing he'll never forgive himself for is walking out of his dealer's apartment to see me huddled in the backseat of his car, crying hysterically. Man. I hope you're going well with each other now. Oh man, this hits close to home. I'm a recovering heroin and benzodiazepine addict myself. And while I don't have children yet, I'm getting married in the next year and I can't imagine having children while still using. Those drugs only make you care about chasing that next fix or high, regardless of who is dependent on you. I hope you and your father are doing well, and just know that while being an addict is awful, it's an amazing thing that your dad could quit and reconcile with you. Not everyone gets that chance. Tell your dad that he kicks some serious ass. Cheers. My dad going to the bar every night and only got to see him when he was drunk or not at all. Always had a plate of dinner saved for him. He would usually scream at my sisters and mother if he did get home early enough. On a side note, reading this post is sad as fuck. Went to pick up my uncle at a crack house when I was like 11. People sprawled out everywhere. Some lady was on the couch sleeping naked. Me and my cousins were just snickering cause we got to see boobies. What were you doing inside the house when you picked up your uncle? Who were you with? The crack bus driver, just like the rest of us. The magic crack bus, driven by Miss Frizzled. My mother would have to regularly go on rescue missions to stop my grandmother from killing herself. I would get phone calls saying I'm on the way to grandma's again. Do you know why your grandmother was suicidal? She was diagnosed with bipolar and was on and off her meds a lot. My mum had a kind of sixth sense to know when she was about to have another episode and would drop everything to go stop her. Shit cycles like no other, and most people with it like to think they're unpredictable, but really can be read like an open book before hitting a new episode. My wife has it, and if she stops sleeping so much and wants to argue more, I know a high is coming. If she's just absolutely exhausted and not bathing, I know a low is going to hit. I've usually got like a 2 or 3 day warning. Yep, unpredictability is a huge misconception about bipolar. An episode has several days of onset and the warning signs are very obvious if you know what to look for. One of the most effective treatments is teaching patients how to recognize this so they can adjust accordingly. When I was 0.8 till I was about 10, the school else teacher would sometimes pull me out of recess to sit down with me and play weird games. I hated it because it meant I wasn't outside writing my stories, and besides, I was a native English speaker. Why did I ever need to do anything with the ELS teacher? Yeah, turns out she was the counselor and she was trying to get enough information to show that I had signs of autism/AD/a learning disorder to give to the National Health Service and get me an actual psychologist because my parents were refusing to send me to one. Unfortunately, her husband died before she could finish, and I didn't end up going to one until I was 17, when I was legally allowed to do that sort of thing on my own. She tried to do a good thing, right? She tried to, yes, but she wasn't a great teacher, so I didn't have a high opinion of her. She thought I didn't speak proper English because I had just moved from Australia and didn't quite understand that most people in Norway don't understand a thick South Australian accent, and so used words she, as an American, didn't understand. That's a globetrotter frustration there. When I was around 8, my best friend at the time used to steal bad food from her pantry, and we'd go into her room and she'd then explain to me how we had to be skinny because being skinny meant boys would like us. And so she would then meticulously read the backs of the cookie packs and count out every cookie and how many calories there were for each of us. She also was obsessed with shaving all her body and would try and pressure me into shaving my legs and arms. Once again, boys liked it when you were hairless. I never really grasped how bizarre it was for 8-year-olds to count calories and be hairless for boys. Years later, my primary school had a national scandal where 10 to 12-year-olds were sexually abusing each other on the mat during class, at lunchtime, and any opportunity they had. I can remember lots of peer pressure for kids to finger each other and make out because that meant you were cool and liked by the hot boys. I was very fortunate to not be involved, and looking back, it honestly so fucked up. Don't know if any of it was related, but just from 7 to 12 it was quite gross. At 8, what is there to even shave? Everything else is worse, but that just sticks out to me. I had leg and arm hair at that age. It was all very light and translucent, but I remember trying to shave it once because I was trying to copy my mom and older sister. My older sister used to play our Disney read-along tapes to my younger brother and I, whilst guiding us through the words in the books. She taught us to read this way. I didn't realize till years later that she was using the tapes to cover the sound of our parents fighting downstairs. It saddens me that she never got to have a childhood. This hits home for me. My little sister and I used to have lots of little coping mechanisms to get us through our parents' tirades. I remember once we had an inside joke that ran for years about our mom looking like a pissed off kangaroo once when she was flipping out, because once she got so mad she literally started jumping up and down. Ridiculous how adult people can behave in such a way. Sorry, mate. When I was young, I was really good friends with a girl whose grandparents lived across the street, and we got along really well and would hang out all the time. At some point, I was maybe 4 or 5 at the time, she invited me to her uncle's house, and they had a big above ground pool built into their deck, and we went swimming. Eventually we got out, but we both wanted to get back in, and the uncle said if we wanted to go back into the pool we had to skinny dip. Again, we were both no older than 5. But we did. It took a long time for me to realize the severity of the situation, the implications. IDK. Half of me feels like it was harmless. Half of me is like, damn, who the fuck does that? If you don't mind me asking, did the uncle watch or anything? He may have just been trying to be funny and thought it was no big deal. He may have skinny dipped very often in his childhood, given the social norms from his era. Or maybe he was a pedophile. I don't mind. You're all good. He did watch. I have a pretty scratchy memory of the whole thing, but I do have a belief that it wasn't a predatory request for us to get naked, and think that it was more a being funny situation. But after it popping back into memory and looking back on it, it's still rather unsettling. In middle school, I started getting a lot of stomach itches due to undiagnosed acid reflux. I was also a really anxious kid, so I feared I was gonna throw up a lot. Thus, almost every night I'd take half a Tums. When I offhandedly told my best friend, she looked terrified. I think you might be addicted to Tums, she said. We had just learned about addiction, and I told her I didn't feel withdrawal without the medicine, and that I was just taking it as prescribed. She still seemed unconvinced, so I told her she was being silly and dropped it. In high school, I learned her brother's drug addiction had been tearing the family apart, and she was probably terrified one of her closest friends was using too. Please tell me you guys stayed close friends. When I was in kindergarten, they would make us kneel in a corner on some wood piece or STH. That was utterly painful for every time we hurt each other or cursed, which happened a lot apparently, and as soon as I got to elementary school I asked the teacher the first time I was in trouble where I should go kneel. They took attention to that, and long story short they called the police on our old kindergarten, and it's now closed since 2006. Edit. To clarify a few questions. This took actually place in Eastern Bavaria in the early 2000s. It was a Catholic kindergarten and all of this was considered rather normal inside its walls. At my kindergarten, the teacher read us a book about another kindergarten where the protagonist, a kid, got locked up in a closet by a demon, his kindergarten teacher, and would then go on adventures to fight the demon/teacher. I remember our teacher telling us that this actually happens in some kindergartens in our city. In hindsight, she probably meant the locked up in a closet thing, but 4-year-old me thought she meant the demons. My 8th grade science teacher locked my friend in a cabinet and got fired. The long-term substitute brought his griddle in and made us all pancakes every week. I really wonder what was going through the original teacher's head. On the other hand, the substitute sounds lovely.